If we think about food and we think about change, I think we always say eat like how your grandparents used to eat. But unfortunately, that what we don't account for is we don't grow food like the way our grandparents would. You think about how soil has depleted, you think about the microplastics that are entering our food system, you think about the nutrition. Is the soil fertile enough to give you the nutrition? So we think about food in a very one dimensional way.
We are so grateful to be supported by these community champions: Sales MD, Team Friday, Realist Lab, Kiana Patterson, Diego Chavez, Jer Boucher, Heather Ryder, Janine Sua, Lily Roca, and Steve Kernan.
Hola, hello, hi, bienvenido, and welcome back, or maybe welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers. As you may or may not know, this is the show where I get the privilege, I get to, not have to, I get to have weekly conversations with the best and brightest entrepreneurial thinkers across all sectors and segments of society as we come together to try to leave this world a little bit better than we found it before this conversation. Today, I'm super excited to be joined by an old friend, Priyanka Srinivas, who has got some really cool titles, by the way, at her job. Co-founder, director, and chief hustle officer of Deep Bio. And we're going to talk all about Deep Bio. We're going to talk all about Priyanka. We're going to talk about the world of food and everything related to it. There's a lot to cover today. So first, let me tell you a little bit about her before we get to meet her and welcome her into the show. I've had the pleasure of watching Pri pursue her dreams for nearly a decade now. I think since like early 2018, when we crossed paths for the first time in Santiago, Chile, where she had emigrated in pursuit of her entrepreneurial ideas. I'll always remember one of the first conversations we had when she came up to me in a conference room area or like kind of a lunchroom cafeteria area at this building we were in sharing. And she thanked me for being one of the first persons to consistently like their young company's social posts and how much that meant to them as they were trying to take their ideas out into the world. And that kind of forever connected our bond, which was really cool. We shared a selfie that day, and she was displaying their products for the first time to our fellow community members. And it was just a great life moment that reminds me all the time how lucky I am to have connected with such cool people from all over the world. She and her husband are incredible life and business partners, standing strong in one another's corners as they weather the trials and tribulations of a budding entrepreneurial empire while crisscrossing the globe, exploring, learning, and building in this ultra-competitive, complex, and massive food sciences market. Pri and her teams aren't just building a company or a product, though. She's really trying to rewrite how we, humanity, eats and how the industries that feed us develop the foods that we eat every day. From creating food products to ingredients to scaling global retail systems and now engineering nutrition and food science at the molecular level, she's blending AI, biology, and bold ambition to challenge an entire industry, really. If the food industry we consume from is broken, she's not just fixing it, she's kind of replacing the operating system in some ways. Food is as fundamental to our daily existence as sleep or the air we breathe or the water we drink to sustain ourselves as human beings. And so I've been really eager to have this conversation, frankly, for a few years, because I really can't think of anything more important to talk about entrepreneurially than what we eat. So with all that said, Pri, welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers. It's so awesome to share this conversation today.
Hi, Rob. Thank you so much to have me as one of your guests. And I'm so looking forward to this conversation.
No, it's great. It's great to see you. For context, everybody, she is in India right now. She's a world traveler, and her and her husband are usually sprinkled somewhere around the globe in all kinds of different time zones. But she's joining us from India. So it's my early morning here as we record in LA and her later evening. So we're really, really grateful for her spending some time with us today to talk about all the stuff that I teased in the intro. And so first question, Pri, like this is just kind of baseline for me. Eating food, right? Like to sustain ourselves as humans has essentially been like largely unchanged as kind of a truth since we crawled out of caves. And I'm curious, like, are we now at a time in history when that fundamental truth of how we consume foods, which really maybe hasn't changed in thousands and thousands of years, is finally really changing?
So, Rob, I think if we think about food and we think about change, I think we always say, eat like how your grandparents used to eat. And that's a very, very popular saying, right? But unfortunately, that what we don't account for is we don't grow food like the way our grandparents would. You think about how soil has depleted. You think about the microplastics that are entering our food system. You think about the nutrition. Like, is the soil fertile enough to give you the nutrients? So, so we think about food in a very as one-dimensional way. And even if you think about, say, when you think about our ancestors or the cavemen, the fruits they ate are not the fruits that we eat. They have been genetically modified, they have been sweetened. We actually eat very, very different than our previous generation. Similarly,
Okay.
our future generation would also eat very differently than what we eat. Because in the past, we would optimize for hunger, where we would be picking vegetables, fruits, hunting. Then we industrialized agriculture. That's actually the first industry per se, where we started to grow food. We started to be very specific. Then we were like, hey, now it's not about food, but it's about how do you avoid the shortage of food, like the depletion or the famines or like food shortages. So it was more about optimizing for calories. So that's where the preservation of food came in, industrialization of food came in. But now we have passed that generation. Now we are overfed sometimes and we have over calories, but we are not really having the nutrients that our body needs, which is human biology. So the next stage that we see this evolution is we don't eat for our body in terms of our biology. And that is where this transition is happening, where it is about how do we really feed our body in the right way and the right proportion. And in that process,
Okay.
like you rightly pointed out in your introduction, the operating system might change a bit. We would still enjoy food, but probably the operating system would not be as identical as we have seen it for the last 40, 50, 60 years.
Okay. Help. That's fascinating. Thank you for that already. I'm learning things already. This is great. So I want to kind of set a baseline, maybe a little bit of a follow on to what you just said, right? So let's better understand food in the context of, as you already started to describe, kind of the novice, the average consumer like me, not the expert like you. Like, there's food that comes from the ground, right? And then there's, or at least my novice understanding of it was, then there's food that's kind of manufactured or industrialized for our consumption. What it sounds like, if I was hearing it correctly, is in many ways that is kind of one and the same nowadays versus how it was, say, many generations ago or thousands of years ago, when there might have been like a true delineation between this is kind of stuff that comes from the food that comes from the ground, and then this is food that's industrialized or manufactured. Now it sounds like even the stuff that comes from the ground, in like 99.9% of the commercial cases, is still kind of treated or industrialized. I don't even know the proper words. Is that accurate? Is there a difference between the two anymore, or is it all just the same thing?
So the food that we know today, like when we talk about whole foods, we talk about food, and we are now going into organic, where we are like, hey, I want organic food. I do not want the mass manufactured food, which is fruits and vegetables that have heavy use of fertilizers, pesticides, and are not really nutrient dense, right? What we at DBio are building, or what the solution we are looking for, is that how do we now evolve this? That how do you really look for two ways? One is, yes, we think about food the natural growing pattern wise. If you think about cacao or if you think about coffee, they are going to go extinct very soon, because there is no way, with the amount of consumption they would have and the amount of deforestation, you would be able to enjoy a bar of chocolate at the same price.
Wow.
So what you would be doing is or the technologies that we are looking for is you use microbes, or you use these microbes, where in a laboratory, you will create a DNA identical solution. So you will still enjoy chocolate, or you will still enjoy coffee. It is just that it's not from a plant, but it's probably from a large fermenter. But If you look at the end structure, if I have to draw a very rude comparison or a very parallel comparison, if you think about diamond and lab grown diamonds, the natural diamonds and the
Okay.
lab grown diamonds both are molecularly same. One was built by the earth with a lot of pressure over billions of years, and that's how the diamond was created. But the other is you're using science to be able to do the same thing, and it's almost extremely difficult for a naked eye to tell you the difference. Similarly, when you think about food, it will be identical at a molecular structure, at a flavor profile, at the nutrition level. It is just that you would not be going to a farm and plucking it and then processing it. You would process it
Right.
at a final level. So that is the difference in terms of the
Interesting.
process is different. The product is the same.
And is there an argument to be made that maybe in some ways, if I'm picking up on some of the things you've said already, like in some ways the foods that were grown in the grounds that we thought of, but are now so industrialized or processed or fertilized, as you say, they're not as nutrient dense. Are you or these new processes able to actually create this this newer version, for lack of a better word right now, but have this be actually better for us? Like from a nutrient standpoint, so are you not just, I guess here's a different way to say it. Like, are you not just replicating like, hey, cacao, we're going to run out of it. And so therefore, like my friend Carlos in Madrid, who sells specialized chocolates that he mines from farmers in Colombia, like he could replace it with something similar, but instead of just replacement, could it hypothetically actually be better for us?
Right. Absolutely. That's exactly what it is. So think of the ultimate product. When you compare product to product, they are same. But when you go back and look behind the curtains, which we all don't go to the farms every day, but the way it's done, it's a little different. That's one way of looking. The other part of nutrition that we're trying to solve is when you're talking about specific nutrients. For example, when you're thinking about a specific fat or a specific protein that is really good for, say, human biology, and you cannot consume more of it to be able to get that particular nutrition. Let me give you an example here, Rob. For your daily dosage, if you have to consume and you want iron in your body, you will eat spinach. But do you know that every single day, you need to consume 5 cups of spinach, just spinach, to get your daily recommended dose? Is that feasible? Now imagine that is just one example. You have 13 amino acids.
That is definitely not feasible for me, by the way. I'm not a spinach guy, so that is definitely not feasible.
So imagine the amount of vitamins, minerals, amino acids, proteins, fats that we really need. And if you have to have each one in their whole form, it is not humanly possible, because today, like our ancestors, we don't just eat. We have other things to do. So the time is not enough. Our lifestyles don't support it. So when there are those specific nutrients, how do you extract that specific nutrient in a specific dosage for people to consume? Like you can't constantly keep drinking a lot of milk, or you can't have a lot of spinach. You can't have a lot of A particular fruit, B particular fruit, just every single day to get your dosages. And for those, the way that we work in terms of isolating that particular molecule and multiplying that, which is again safe, approved, clinically valid, using the right technology, and that output is far more beneficial for people to consume for better health. So you
Fascinating.
can see that nutrient specific deficiencies like Lego blocks in your health, so that each person is different, and then how do you tackle for each person's health? So humans are now moving, or we have been questioning a lot of what we are eating today.
We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at eSudo. You know, running any business, but especially a law firm, means balancing a lot. And technology, frankly, shouldn't be a headache. eSudo makes information technology and cybersecurity simple for law firms large or small. With over 20 years of experience, they specialize in everything from Microsoft 365 management to advanced cybersecurity solutions. They help you to stay ahead of threats, manage your data securely, and keep your tech running smoothly so that you can focus on what matters most, your clients. eSudo understands the legal industry's unique needs, offering tailored solutions to ensure that your firm is always in compliance and always protected. Are you ready to upgrade your firm's technology or get help with your questions? Visit esudo.com.
We are eating today? And those questions with newer technologies, advanced science, we are now able to achieve things which was not realistic in the past. And that evolution is happening.
Yeah, I mean, this is amazing. Because I think one of the things and I'll cast myself in the role of like the average consumer person today, right? So like one of the things that like regular folks like me maybe totally misunderstand is, we hear, I mean, this happens in all technology, but especially in food, right? Like we hear so many references to things being manufactured or processed or synthesized or synthetic or we hear all these words, right, that essentially kind of are demonizing science in relationship to either replicating or creating new foods. And so it's all like to the average consumer, right? It's all that stuff is supposedly bad. And so what I'm hearing from you today though is a reasonable point of view, right? Like, let's not demonize all science. And in fact, what maybe is happening more now behind the scenes of the industry is that there are companies like yours, people like you guys and your scientists and the people that you work with that are skipping over this generation that we've been in when science was really only used to create worse food, right? But more of it. And now we're moving into a period where it sounds like the science is really being utilized to not just create more, but to create better. And also it sounds like from what you just said, like not just better in the generic, but like better, more like personally targetable so that Rob Ryan can understand that at 58 years old, my physical makeup, my DNA, my biology, like I have a different set of specific nutrient-based needs to optimize my health than you do or than anybody else, even another 58-year-old guy sitting next to me might. Is that where we're at? We're really kind of entering an entirely new era?
Eventually, I think that is where we would be entering. I think we are at that entry position of people looking at personalized nutrition. And like you rightly pointed out, right, Rob, if you think about you or me and we think about everyone our age, like all of us have different lifestyles, different eating patterns, different working styles, different stress levels, so on and so forth. And everyone's biology is so unique. And it's never one size fits all. Like you think about the allergens, right? Why are some people allergic to certain foods while the others aren't, right? So, but at that point of time or at that stage that we were, it was like science was not able to get to the level of personalization and being like we understanding. Even today, I don't think we really scratch the surface of understanding our human body. And for our human body, nutrition is like so key. But we are at that stage where science is getting deeper. People are like scientists are going deeper into understanding. It's no more about did I eat or didn't I eat and how many calories did I consume. We are moving into proteins now. There's a lot of conversation around proteins, good fats, bad fats. Then there's a conversation around sweeteners, and that was just at the macros. Now, if you think about it and really look at the market, you will see a lot of the supplements space picking up because people are like, okay, I get my macros, but what about my micronutrients? And from micronutrients, people are now going and saying, okay, what about my gut health? Like, what's the biotics behind it? And while we are looking at it, then you either have these celebrities or billionaires are like, okay, all that's fine, but what about longevity, right?
How can I really?
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that a little bit later. Yeah, absolutely. I want to dig into that too.
So I think it's about how we are phase by phase going deeper into understanding our body. And that's where I think food is really the fuel behind everything that makes this body function or this machine function. So I think
Yeah. Wow.
that's where we really have to be okay by this thing of, hey, demonizing things or being skeptical. But I do understand that all of us are skeptics, whether it's transportation from like before Ford started the cars, the horse to the car was a transition. Every single industry from X to Y is a transition. So is it with food, and it's just a part of innovation. Is the way I see
well, and what it sounds like to me, like the storyteller here in me, right, is what I'm learning. Top of mind is not only is the science evolving and the purpose of the science, the use cases of the science evolving to go from, as we said, super generically, to go from like for the last 75 years, the world used science to mostly just produce more, but not better, just more and more shelf ready and more like all that kind of stuff, just more, right? Now we're really, you're talking about producing better. And in that transition, there will be an opportunity for new messaging and new storytelling around that, right? So like you said, every new innovative industry or new innovation inside of an existing industry eventually has to tell a new story versus the old story. And instead of this story being like science versus what comes out of the ground, it's really new science about better for us and healthier versus the old use case of science, which was just mass production of more. And eventually we'll get over this. Like we, the regular consumer, will start to understand that it's a different message and it's a more important, it's a bigger breakthrough than just more, right? Which is fascinating. Wow. Okay, let's do this. Before we get into more of the deep details of things that I'm curious about, let's take a break here and like just give us kind of your commercial. Like just tell us about the business of your business. Like, so let's talk a little bit about Deep Bio, like, and, you know, just the normal businessy questions I'm curious about, right? Like, what's the business model? How does Deep Bio make money? Who are your customers or partners? Like stuff like that. I'm just curious, like it's kind of a little bit of the entrepreneurial story here.
So Deep Bio is a B2B company. Think of us as, or the ones, we call ourselves the Intel Inside, for the lack of a better word. It is primarily the engine that powers brands, and all the brands food brands that are looking at innovation, looking at functionality in their food are our clients. And how we do that is we are primarily as a company, we're a research and development IP first company. So it's all about intellectual property and intellectual property building. And that intellectual property that we build, we commercialize it through three ways. One, very, very plain and simple, create an ingredient, sell the ingredient to a large or a medium-sized company that puts it into their formulation and launches a functional product into the market. The second is licensing the technology. Like the know-how of it is what we license. So we can have, like, for example, there is a technology where there's knowledge transfer of how you have to engineer that particular strain. So we give them the strains and the operating SOP, and then they would produce it, and they would give us royalty and licensing fee for commercializing that solution in the market. The third is a very, I would say, very easy or a very transactional way of selling the intellectual property. So we sell off the complete intellectual property to certain clients for specific geographies or specific geography and use case. And that is the way we commercialize. So these are the three ways. But initially, because at the stage that we are in, we have to put a lot more effort of just being an ingredient player, because companies are like, okay, there's this amazing functional ingredient. What do I do with it? So what we've identified a particular niche specifically in India is we work with quick commerce players who have very strong penetration and distribution, but they want to bring innovative brands and solutions to the market, but they don't have the scientific know-how. They have the muscle of distribution. So with them, we work with them on formulation building for their private label, and we provide our technology, our solution to the complete formulation part of it, and then they commercialize it under their own brand. But the good thing is, once they commercialize it, their reach is immense. Like, I don't know if you've heard of this 5-minute, 10-minute deliveries of groceries that happen in India.
Sure.
And that's where these companies bring that muscle, where they have millions of customers every single day on their platform. So it helps us with larger impact and stronger go-to-market. And we skip a lot of the, we are very, very clear that we will not do a brand play. We want to be that B2B enabler.
I'm curious. I've got a bunch of questions now. I'm curious, one, and this is just because I've watched the journey from the start. Like, tell us a little bit. You could probably spend a whole podcast just talking about this answer, but tell us a little bit about how you went from what the company was in the very beginning to this B2B, partner model now.
Wow. That's going to be very.
And that's, like I said, that's a whole other podcast. But like, just the short. Here's why I asked the question.
Very quick.
To give our audience a sense of, like, you didn't start here. You didn't start as like a science team who was going to sell the ingredient. Like, you started something much smaller with an idea, and you've metamorphosized into this.
Right. So the background of Deep Bio is initially we were called the Livegreen Co. And fundamentally, if you think about the fundamental stone, it hasn't changed. It has always been nutrition, and it's always been clean. That hasn't changed. It's about how we are doing it has changed. So we started off with that. Then we went to Startup Chile. We worked on our databases, and we always worked on data and databases as our primarily foundation, which continues to be. And then we were like, okay, we have these amazing ingredients that can be replacing synthetic, ultra-processed additives in food. How do we go to market? That's when we realized you may come up with a magic potion, but nobody really cares. So then we were like, okay, let's go build a brand. Let's bring it to market. Let us show that clean labels are actually possible. You can do stuff without a lot of the synthetic additives. Large companies stick to the comfortable rule book, and that's how they've been building. So they don't want to really deviate. So that's when we launched a brand. We went into all the supermarket chains in Chile, over 600, 700 points of sale. But we always knew we wanted to always be that enabler and not really build a plan. Because when you build a brand, it is huge capital. You go into one product line, build out is very, very different. So we were like, no, but this is not what we really wanted to do. We were making good money there. We had good penetration. We were building brand, but then we realized that's not our core. Our core has always been, we wanted to be technology based. So that's when we scaled back and we were like, okay, now that we have these ingredients, we had amazing ingredients. We had large companies even interested in them. But I would say the learning was you can have great solutions, but if the world supply chain is not built for it, you can't scale it. And then we were like, okay, we have the solution, but now nobody's producing it at that scale. So it cannot go into a product at scale. And thereby the impact is not what we were driving for. And that's when we met our third co-founder, Dr. Kavish. He was working with a precision fermentation company, which had raised around $750 million. Then he came on board. And then we were like, okay, what can we do at scale? And that's how we moved into deep science and deep technology and moved that space. And then continuously always have that. It's sometimes, should we go and launch a brand? Because when you launch a brand, it's a little more fancier. People can see it. Consumers can try it day one, right? But when you're working with large or medium-sized corporates, the sales cycle, go-to-market is so long. It's so long. But we chose that if we want to do multiple intellectual property, because our intellectual property also, you have some, for example, we have something in infant formula, which will be stuck in regulation for 5 to 7 years just to go to market. So we
Sure.
have technology solutions or ingredient solutions, which are active functional ingredients, through a broad spectrum. We have some which we protect through trade secrets that have quick go-to markets, while we have others that have a lot of regulation approval before it gets to market.
We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Plaintext Capital. You know, investing in Web3 and cryptocurrencies isn't about jumping on the latest trends. It's about understanding where the market is headed and why. Plaintext Capital is a digital asset investment firm focused on long-term strategies backed by deep research, backing the best Web3 companies and protocols, and investing in the newest asset classes of the future. They believe that Web3 crypto will drive digital innovation for decades to come, creating significant value for investors. In fact, their team of highly skilled professionals work with institutions and serious individual investors who want clarity in a space full of hype and noise. So if you're looking to cut through the chaos and invest with purpose, Plaintext Capital brings a disciplined, high-conviction approach to investing. You can learn more and meet the team at plaintextcapital.com.
Gets to market. So that's where we were like, okay, we always want to be this intellectual property company. So let's not get tempted about go to market fast.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that reference that like the go-to-market consumer stuff is sexy, right? And it looks cool and there's a lot of press around it and all that. But I also love in your opening statements, like your reference to the old Intel Inside, right? Because I'm old enough to remember when that campaign started. And by comparison, as you just described, kind of, you know, Intel before that campaign, no one ever would have known or needed to know because they were just the chip inside the thing that was the thing that you really thought about or bought as a consumer or as a business, as an enterprise, right? But then they decided that their way to kind of at least get a little bit of the sexiness was to like create a little bit of a PR campaign around them being that behind the scenes. And that is very much what you are, which I love. I'm fascinated by this idea that, like, I mean, fundamentally, what you're doing is helping in so many different ways, right? To kind of attack food as a resource in our humanity. So, I mean, like I talked a little bit about the whole old model of like more versus better, but more is still important. Frankly, now it'll be more better that's important, right? As opposed to more of the bad that is important. And so in so many ways, like you are enabling companies as your partners, as your clients to attack that kind of ever increasing resource scarcity issue that we will always have on Earth. But you're also making like better versions of food, more nutritious, more dense, more personalized. You're going to help these companies to make those foods more accessible to more people, which is a huge impact in and of itself. But you're also leaning into like one of the other parts of this three-legged stool, which is, you talked about it with the billionaires, right? Like is if we're eating more better constructed foods, like we're likely living longer, healthier lives. So now you're feeding the longevity part of it. And still above all of that is your fundamental commitment from the beginning to really being like a science-based company whose core seed or mission is really about improving food, improving nutritiousness and the viability of food. So like your existing purpose isn't just to deal with scarcity or just to deal with longer lives. Those are almost like amazing byproducts of what your really mission is, which is to help these companies to create at scale better food, which, I mean, talk about like, gee, I really want to be a founder with like a mission to wake up and get excited about every day. I mean, how does that, do you think about it at that scale, like all the time, or are you just in the science every day?
I don't think we really think about like the overall vision. I would say our CEO Sasi is very, very particular, and he always keeps like we are mostly, or at least I get stuck with the day-to-day stuff. But when we think about, hey, what's our North Star? And we are like, okay, what should we aspire to do? And then Sasi's like, why can't we aspire to win a Nobel Prize? Like, why can't we solve for nutrition at the level of winning? Like, whether we win, we don't win, it's secondary, but at least you can aim that high that
Right.
you like, this is so fundamental. And with, you think about the food security issues that we are facing, supply chain issues that we are facing, when technology is able to provide food at a particular location with an infrastructure setup which is not very dependent on resources, because we only know that resources are going to deplete, or we would have to like ensure that this afforestation we'll have to rebuild. But as humans, I think we have always been a very resilient race of uh, of the world.
We are.
And
Yep.
and I think that probably we would probably grow food and do and preserve our environment, but the food we would consume probably would be coming out of an industrial setup, right? Because that's more logical, more controllable. You will not have scarcity. It'll be far more safe. So I think our vision at a very high level, at a company internal conversation, is like, how can we build for something at that level? But
Yeah.
you don't think about
I love
it
that.
every day. You think about it the days
No.
you are like having a conversation about how far you've got and where are we going.
Of course.
But yeah.
Or when you get to come on a podcast with me and then I remind you of it, and then you're like, hey, we should think about Nobel Prizes, right? That's awesome. Tell Sassy that I love that. I'm all for the Nobel Prize pursuit. All right. So like, obviously, great progress, amazing story. What a journey, early traction, huge. And we're not talking private names, so we can keep secrets here. That's okay. But like, huge traction with big companies changing the world. But as you and I both know, right, when you're an entrepreneur, when you're an entrepreneurial thinker, especially when you're like out in front of something, like you guys are out in front of this, there's always skepticism and there's always pushback and there's always resistance. The very people that you are already turning into your clients, there are others of them, right? The massive food companies, these partners in this. I would imagine there have to be times when you're standing in front of a group or you're standing at a boardroom table or you're at a conference and you get met with just nothing but skepticism. And you get met with like, young lady, you don't understand this industry. This industry has been run by us, these old white middle-aged men for the last 100 years. This is how it's always going to happen. We're this huge company, right? What is the reaction? We get it. You have some clients, like some people love what you're doing, but what is the other reaction in the industry to what you're trying to do? Is it all positive, or is there a healthy line of skepticism and curiosity that they have to be convinced?
I'd say the large companies, I think, I would say initially there was skepticism, but now I would say it is at a space of curiosity where everybody's curious. And that's, I don't think it's politically right, but the amount of innovation led firms within these teams reach out to startups is crazy. Like every single large company has a competition, and every competition selects around 15 startups. Those 15 startups are brought in. The startup founders are asked to pitch, but nothing has actually reached the final consumer. Nothing really hits the market. So I think it is at that stage where everybody's curious. Everybody wants to know what you're doing. It's a little tricky they want to sense and test and see if it's working, but there's a huge lack of commitment of, yes, I'm going to back this.
Yeah.
To either make it succeed or fail. Probably it's because of their structures or whatsoever.
Sure.
But the other thing that I've noticed, which these companies, other than curiosity, is you like over a period of time you make friends, right? And then when they become friends and you're like, hey, like what's stopping? And they're like, and they're employees, they are not the owners.
Of course.
And they tell you that if I say that this is better, it is like telling the world that my past was worse.
Right?
So even though I know, it gets so tricky because XYZ product gives me, say, $300 million, and that's my legacy product. And I know it's filled with crap. But if I have to improvise it, I am going and telling the world that you're paying me $300 million for nothing, right?
Yeah.
So they are in the
Wow.
space of wanting to do good, but they're also stuck. And it takes a lot of courage and bravery for somebody to make that switch. And I
No,
get where
100%.
they are coming from, but
Sure.
it's reality.
No, I mean it makes industrial business sense, right? Like what you just said, although you and I may not like that truth as individuals, as business people and pragmatists, you can understand where that truth comes from.
Correct.
My analogy would be, and it's not a direct comparison, but broad analogy would be, right? Like I've said for decades that I never understood, or I still don't understand why, if I were running the world's biggest oil and gas companies, right? And I knew that inevitably that resource was going to go away and that inevitably new power would be generated more cleanly through different technologies. If it was Rob Ryan owned BP, for example, I would want BP. I would make sure that BP essentially eventually becomes known as the biggest clean energy company in the world, right? And I would just transition away from it. And I would be like, yeah, that's what we used to do because that's what everybody used to do. But now we're doing this and we're the leaders, right? And yet, but to your point, to the same argument, that doesn't happen fast enough, and it doesn't happen as fast as it could because they're stuck in that space of they know what the future is when it comes to food, but if they admit it, they are essentially cannibalizing their own existing business, and very few companies. Eventually, some companies will partner with you,
Right.
and they will become the market leaders.
Correct. And I think it's also about like their purpose and profit, right? What are they gaming or gunning against? And it's also about, do they have, who do they have to answer? Do they have to answer the share market, or do they have to answer the final consumer, or is it like completely private? And
Yeah.
I attribute a lot of this to leadership. It's about to take calls like the Rob Ryan, who would transition to clean energy. You really need very strong leaders. So I think that
Right.
leadership.
No, those people are rare.
Yeah. And I think those
So
are
much-
going to be the winners, ultimately. The winners.
Ultimately, right? Yeah, I say it all the time. You'll love this. It's one of the underlying theses of this show and the phrase entrepreneurial thinkers, and how I talk about in the preview of the show that is out there. I always say, like, I fundamentally have come to believe now over the last 20 years, the world needs more entrepreneurial thinkers, not just more entrepreneurs or executives or investors. We need entrepreneurs and executives and investors, but we need more entrepreneurial thinkers, essentially people willing to take the risk to lead, right, as we go through these massive societal historic transitions. I mean, what you're talking about, it's right back to the beginning of the show today. Like, I mean, you are fundamentally rewiring the internal operating system, the Legos, as you say, of food. I mean, like, that's like, right? That is the most, arguably the single most important thing. I mean, Sasi's going to clip this. He's going to use this for your Nobel Peace Prize application, right? Like, I mean, this is like the most important thing. And so of course there's going to be that healthy resistance or healthy skepticism or self-preservation from an industrial standpoint. But eventually you win. Like, if not deep bio per se alone, but eventually the categorical progress wins, which is incredible.
And I think when you were talking about the win, I think the win is to all the entrepreneurs in this space that are pushing it to the next level, each one to our own. I don't
Yeah.
really, like you said, the win does not mean the bio per se. It is about the thinking and the process that this needs to change. And we are going to change. And I think that set of entrepreneurs winning is going to be a huge, I would say, win for society and for the next
Yes.
generation.
Huge for my grandchildren. Like this will be the types of food that they will eat, and they will eat better, and then therefore they will live longer, and it will probably be less expensive, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm curious. You said something earlier that made me think from a capital standpoint, from an investor standpoint, right? Like the retail businesses that we were talking about before, right? We know that those consumer businesses require just immense amount of capital, right? And that's a very particular type of investor. But I also, like here in Southern California, for example, two things are present locally. Like down south of us in San Diego, the pharma biotech kind of industry is very big in San Diego, right? It's big and growing here in Los Angeles, but it's bigger in San Diego. Here in Los Angeles, we have a growing, let's call it hard science, hard technology, physical products, manufacturing, weapon systems, drones, things for the military. Like that is being born again here, just like it was born here with airplanes and flight during World War II. And I know that those two industry sectors, deep, hard things, require immense amounts of capital, right? And there's very particular investors. Does what you guys are doing, does what Deep Bio is doing, specific to Deep Bio, and then more broadly, does what you're doing require huge amounts of capital to create this type of science and to create these types of scientists at scale? And if it does, please tell us about that. But then also, like, who are the types of particular investors that are interested in these things?
Right. I think for our business, there are two parts, Rob. One part is the intellectual property IP part. And for the IP part, the investors are patient investors because it's intellectual property, it's deep science, very, very clear on patent, you have a pathway. And think of how pharma was built. Think of it in a similar way being built for food and nutrition as an industry. Then in terms of scaling, the scaling requires completely different funds, and that is more infrastructure. So we are seeing, like, for biomanufacturing, you need private partners, you need government support, and that's an industry by itself. I'll talk to you a little about, say, my city. I come from a city called Hyderabad, and Hyderabad in India is very, very famous for pharma. Like the top 15 people in my city are pharma giants, like billionaires.
Yeah.
And now the government is focusing on creating another space called Genome Valley, which is more focused on how we build pharma for generic. How can we build it for fermentation technologies like precision fermentation? Because it needs a lot of infrastructure support. And I have been seeing multiple countries and multiple governments actually investing in biomanufacturing because that is going to be the new oil. Like being able to biomanufacture. So you need that government infrastructure kind of an investor for huge capex related built up.
Yeah, that makes sense. And to my analogy of like the defense and technology and space industries that are booming here in Los Angeles area, it's the exact same thing, right? Like we've had a couple of incredible guests on the show over the last year. And eventually what we wind up talking about is like,
we are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Haney and Company. You know, we all know that in today's complex financial landscape, having a trusted advisor can make all the difference. Since 1960, Haney and Company has been providing comprehensive accounting services to a diverse range of clients, from small businesses to large corporations. With nearly 400 professionals across 13 locations, they offer services in tax, audit, business consulting, and client advisory.
In fact, their commitment to excellence has earned them recognition from Accounting Today and Forbes magazines. At Haney and Company, though, it's not just about balancing books. It's about building lasting relationships based on trust and mutual growth. So visit HaneyCPAs.com. That's HaneyCPAs.com to learn how they can support your business's financial journey. What we wind up talking about is like that their biggest clients or their partners or their investment partners are the Department of Defense or the government agency in charge of this or this country, right? And that's that it seemed like that would be true with what you're doing, but I wasn't sure coming into this conversation. So that's fascinating.
I think it's also because when you're looking at biomanufacturing, it's not about you will set up a space for yourself. It will not really make feasibility. The feasibility will not really make sense. And I also personally think that when you are scaling such solutions, it's very, very important of industry government collaboration so that from you will be able to get that hit that ROI, you will be able to create that infrastructure. And that becomes a clear pathway of a complete new industry for a country or a region.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is, and again, like these examples you've given, right? Like that's how regional and or national or subnational economic development happens, right? Is people in places see seeds of things that get born, right? The analogy of Silicon Valley all the time, right? Is as I used to travel around Latin America, I basically used to just try and educate people on the reality of it and try to explain to them that it wasn't what they saw on the TV show, right? It was really just that it was rooted in incredible universities who were creating incredible advancements of the era 70, 80, 100 years ago. And then governments who came in and seeded their ability to research and pursue and produce other things. And then the next thing you know is you have an industry, right? And then the commercialization and the financialization and all that stuff grows around it, but it doesn't it almost always, every industry essentially gets born in very, very similar ways. And you're on the front edge of this transformation industrial related to food. As you can tell by my enthusiasm and the way my brain is working, I'm so excited for you guys because I know you and I've known you since that photo that day in Chile. And so and I'm not at all surprised, by the way, that this is where you two have gotten to because you're both, and I'm saying this in his stead. He's not here with us today, but like, you're both such thoughtful, intelligent, good people, but you're also even back then, you were big thinkers. Like I didn't call it entrepreneurial thinkers 10 years ago. Now I do, but like that's really what you were then. Is like you were entrepreneurial thinkers who were trying to find entrepreneurial ways to make a living, to be able to keep doing your entrepreneurial thinking. And here you are now where a lot of this is starting to converge and meet up, a decade into the journey. I'm curious, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, and now I'm going to ask you kind of in a different way is, like, you've done a lot of this away from home, so to speak. I mean, you happen to be home right now while we're having this conversation, which is beautiful serendipity. And you got to be home for your mom's birthday, which is incredible. But like, I'm curious now, like, part of me thought coming into this conversation, that was maybe just a bit of the nomad and you guys are adventurers and you like to explore the world and get to know different people in different markets. But now, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, literally, it has most likely, it seems like the global traveling and establishing relationships in these different marketplaces is tied to this opportunity or need to develop relationships with governments and government agencies and understand how entire ecosystems are going to attack biomanufacturing and food and nutrition, and then being at the forefront of that. Is that more of what is informing the geographical moves that you guys have made, or is it mostly just personal?
I would say if we think about it, like we when we started the venture, we went all the way to Chile. And Chile, I would say it was a little thoughtful. It was a little of a guess. It was thoughtful because I was telling Sasi that we are not going to start up anything without capital in our hand, and the capital cannot come from our own bank account. So that's when he told me about, hey, you have people funding you, you have to have a great idea. And that's how the whole accelerator journey started. So but we were also lucky that when we read up about Chile, about its ease to do business, its corruption index, and et cetera, trade agreements with the rest of the world, we were like, oh, surprising. We didn't know this country was actually so good. And that was an afterthought of research of the program. And then we got in, and that's how we went to Chile. But I think going to Chile, I feel that sometimes as an entrepreneur, I don't think if I would have started up this company with Sasi in India, we would have come along so far, because I feel there would have been a sense of comfort and the sense of giving up easily. And that's what I think very personal to me. Each one's to their own. But I feel I would have fallen back saying, oh, I think I'm done with this. But really,
because the common, the comfortable common other choices in your life would have been right there. Like they would have been, you could have been like, I went to lunch with my friend who works for this big company. Like, we're having a bad week. Like I could just go work with her.
Absolutely.
But when you took yourself literally like to a different part of the planet, you, as they say in the, philosophical literature, like they burned all the boats.
Absolutely. And I think that was a very, very good reason of why I feel that our foundation was really strong, because it may feel like I learned a new language. Like my dad speaks a very different language in India, and I don't speak my dad's language, but I learned Spanish, like out of the need. So I think the resilience, the thing of not taking no for an answer. People didn't know Sasi studied at London Business School because it didn't mean much in that part of the world. Right? My qualification didn't matter. What I did didn't matter. So I think that was the grounding that we really needed, especially me. And then from there, we fundraised during COVID. Then we had our next round from a US investor. And that's when we moved to Boston, because we felt like Boston is the mecca of biotechnology. Best colleges in the United States. You'll get amazing talent. We were closer, like built connections in Harvard, was able to go and meet a couple of people in MIT, so on and so forth. And that's when our urge of really finding that sweet spot, because we were not playing from an advantage of home, and we always knew India. So we always knew India back of our hand. We knew how to get costs lowered, but we didn't know the rest of the world. So that's, I think, then the Boston happened. Then we were looking at Singapore, because Singapore was so good with single window clearance for regulation. So going to Singapore, living in Singapore, understanding, because Singapore government was doing phenomenally well about supporting the ecosystem, trying to build that industry. So knowing people there, meeting people in the government. So that opened up our view to the world. And then the only thing that was left was the Middle East. And that's when we were in Singapore, we were having calls in California. It was too long, too far. We kind of knew Singapore because living there 2 years, it's a very, very small country. You kind of know almost everybody in the ecosystem. So we built our connections, we built that network. Like even today, I think I have great friends in Singapore, some amazing ones who I can go and sleep in their couch and they wouldn't mind. And then
I was in Singapore doing business like 23 years ago. And like you said, it's such a small city state. Like I still have friends in Singapore, like 23 years later, right?
Right. And that's when Dubai happened. And I feel now Dubai is our base, but we kind of seen the main spaces across the world for innovation, and we've been into really, really strong. We have also been able to build and establish those networks and connections, whether it's with governments there or whether it's with the industry there. And I think that has really benefited us so far.
Fascinating. All right. So 2 last questions before we finish up. One is a business question, kind of a follow on to something we were talking about, and then one's a bit more personal. So on the business front, and without giving away any secrets or secret plans or anything, I'm curious, kind of like, what should our listeners anticipate? Like, what's next? What's the next set of milestones or accomplishments or things that you guys are focused on in the next couple of years? Like, what's the big next thing that's going to happen for Deep Bio?
The next big thing for DeepBio is continuously building on our intellectual property. So our team is building on extremely cool. So when you do strain engineering, it's about optimizing the strain to create proteins or fats. And we have these two kind of operating systems that can replicate different types of proteins and different types of fats that we can create. So we have some exciting protein and sweeteners and fats that are coming up in R&D. And then we are strongly pursuing the objective of being a thought leader in the biomanufacturing space. So we have conversations with a couple of governments across the world to see how can we really work with them to set up a center of excellence in biomanufacturing, where we would also provide our intellectual property, but also make it that center of excellence where other companies and other startups, but large companies, can benefit by creating that ecosystem. So that is something that we are super excited about. We are having a lot of conversations. Hopefully, in a couple of years, that turns into reality.
Ooh, boy, that is really exciting. Thank you for sharing that. We'll have you back on the show in a couple of years when that's all unfolding, and we can talk about that. That's incredible. All right. So last question. This is just totally personal. And it's funny because we almost just kind of teased it a minute ago when you talked about leaving to go to Chile to kind of burn the boats proverbially and set yourself out on an island of life. If you weren't doing this, like if you weren't this version of yourself doing what you've now been doing for a decade or so, if you had chosen like the other less traveled path in life, what would you have been doing? What would you be doing?
Okay. I think I have to call out that pre-before entrepreneurship and pre-after entrepreneurship are two different people.
Awesome. Okay. So what was pre-before entrepreneurship?
Before entrepreneurship was crazy consumer, very materialistic, somebody who loved promotions, would always work the corporate ladder, very diplomatic, would not like to burn bridges. And I think that was the old Pre. And my aspirations were very basic in terms of, I don't even know why did I come up with an X net worth that I have to earn so much, I should make so much money. And this is the lifestyle that I would aspire to eventually get. I think that was the old Pre. But the old Pre complained a lot, cried a lot every morning before getting to work by 9 o'clock.
Okay.
But the new Pre, I think entrepreneurship really changes you deep down, and it changes you from the very self. And I think the new me is, I really don't care about how people perceive me. I am not scared to talk my mind. I am not materialistic at all. Like before, I would probably judge my net worth by the bag I hold. Today, I really don't care. Like, what do I wear? I probably wear something worth $5 or something. Like, super happy, and I can walk into any room. I think that level of confidence and the aspiration of, I don't know, we would achieve what we would dream to achieve, but I think I'm very content with the life I'm living, the experiences I had, the people I meet. I think it's far more fulfilling as life in this stage. So if I wouldn't see this side of life, I think I would have led a very book-centric life where the world defines how you have to live and probably try to meet that expectation. But today I have absolute no bars. And I think that has really opened me up in terms of, because there is no level that I have to live to, I think I'm living life to the fullest.
Good for you. That's awesome. You would have been just a corporate girly of some sort, right? And had a job and
Have a
and
job, take a
lived in
annual
a nice
vacation.
house, gone on vacation, shopped on the weekends at the mall, like
Right.
just a basic, very basic, but okay life. Hey, that's another choice. But like now, and I love it's so beautiful the way you describe yourself and the way you describe the way you view life now. I've often said over the years, I may have even said it to you way back when we first met, right? To me, entrepreneurship has always been much closer to like the starving artist musician
Right.
journey than it has been to the corporate CEO like wannabe journey that it's always painted as, right? It's always painted as like you want to grow up and be Zuckerberg or whatever. And I'm always like, no, I'm actually much closer to like my artist friend who loves to play the guitar and would go play the guitar at like a bar for free on a Friday night just because he loves to play the guitar. Like it's much more, like you said, it's a cellular level thing. That's a beautiful way to describe it. Thank you for sharing. That's very sweet of you. All right. So last question, and this is a little different tone. So this is more like tactical, give a couple of bullet point answers for folks, a little bit of advice, so to speak, rather than our conversational tone that we've had so far. So if there's someone listening who she thinks she's this kind of entrepreneur, like she thinks that she is an entrepreneurial thinker in whatever industry that she's working in, and she's listening to you and she's like, wow, that's how I feel. Like that's how I am. And they want to be this type of systems builder type of entrepreneur, which is really what I think you are, right? Not just a product person. If an aspiring entrepreneur or an early entrepreneur really wants to think more like a systems builder, and not just a specific product person, what are the one or two key, I don't know whether they would be models or mindsets or decisions, like what are the one or two key things that type of person has to tell themselves to begin with, like tomorrow, if they want to eventually get on that path?
Say, when you want to be a system builder, you should not reference an old pattern or an old path. You can never say that, hey, this is how it was done, or this is the way it will be done. I think if you can break that thought and mindset, I think it's really going to help you build, because when you are a systems thinker, you're building something which does not have a playbook. If it had a playbook, it would have already been built. And that is, I would say, the mindset and the approach that you should have, that nobody knows the playbook. So do it your way. You'll probably chance upon it, or you will change it with time.
That's amazing and super specific and simple, right? I mean, because ultimately, even just listening to you say it, I was like, oh yeah, that's true. Like there is no, if you're literally trying to build a new system of doing things, you don't just reference it against the old system. Like, yes, that's a reference point, but the truth is you're writing a new playbook, and that requires a whole different level of entrepreneurial thinking. That's amazing. This has been, thank you. This has been such a joy. I personally, again, selfishly for me, I've been a fan of yours for almost 10 years now. I think I remember telling you when you thanked me for liking your social posts, when you made your social posts, and I was the only one liking it because I might have been one of the few people seeing it. Like, I think I told you then, like, I'm not just doing it to be nice. Like,
Yeah.
I'm actually excited. I'm a fan of what you're doing. Like, I think what you're doing is really fascinating and cool. And I'm sure I'll be the first of many, many people that will like your post and whatnot. And so I've been that fan for all these years. And in fairness, it's fun. I'll tell our audience this, like, there was a point a couple of years ago when I invited you to be on this show, and you literally told me no because you didn't feel like it was ready yet. Like you didn't feel like, and it wasn't that you weren't confident. It wasn't that we wouldn't enjoy it. It was literally that you knew something I didn't know, which is that there were bigger things you were working on, and you really wanted to have this conversation that we're having today as opposed to the conversation we would have had back then. And so I'm so grateful for the patience of our friendship, and my little bit of professional persistence to keep chasing you, and then to be here at this moment when what you and Sasi are doing is so monumental and so exciting, and yet you guys are exactly still the same humble, kind, thoughtful people that you have been since the moment I met you. And not everybody can say that over a long entrepreneurial journey. And so I'm really, really proud of you guys. And I'm very, very excited to watch what continues to happen because of what you've already done is incredible. I mean, you're literally the way my grandson and soon to be granddaughter eat in the next 20 years, the way they will eat their food when they're in their 20s is going to be informed by the work that you guys are doing today. And that's amazing. So congratulations, but also like, keep going.
No, thank you so much, Rob. Thank you so much for being patient. I always was like, I wanted to do it, but I was that thing of I don't think I'm ready. Even today, I was like, okay, I'm so nervous. I don't know if I should do it or not. But no, it's always great. You are an amazing podcast host, a great human being. You make conversations
Very
feel
kind. Thank
so easy. And I also feel that you make them flow naturally, that there is absolute no burden on my shoulder. I don't think I was expecting it not to go as smooth as it went, but it was, like you said, you're an amazing.
Yay, that's awesome. That's good. I did my job well today. That's awesome. All right, so let's finish up. Thank you for that. Very kind words. So let's finish up. How can people find Deep Bio, which by the way, you can tell them how it's spelled because it's kind of spelled kind of cool. So how can they find it on social media or on the website or whatever? And then if you want people to find or follow you, you can mention that as well. And we'll put all this in the show notes so people can click on it later.
Sure. So Deep Bio is pronounced Deep Bio, but it's written DE3PBio.com. So that's our website. You can always look it up there. I'm extremely active on LinkedIn. I would be more than happy to support fellow entrepreneurs. I have received so much from amazing entrepreneurs and friends, which are founder friends. So that's how I call it. So I would love to return the favor and help anyone in their journey. So please send me a request on LinkedIn, and any questions you have, happy to chat.
It's awesome. Thank you so much. This is wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rob. It was a pleasure. Bye-bye.
And as always, we thank you so much for listening and watching. Today's show was produced by our team at the Storytellers Company in Mexico City and Los Angeles. And you can always find, follow, subscribe, and share our show as found on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or wherever you find your favorite podcast by searching Entrepreneurial Thinkers with Rob Ryan. You can also follow along on our various social media platforms for clips and contents at Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And if you'd like to connect with me, our host, you can find me just about anywhere on social under the handle I am Rob Ryan. Thanks, and have a great day.